Welcome to Chesney Krumlov here. We're in this fantastic meeting room working with all the partners of the Canon project. And the Canon project is a European project about theater technical history. And basically it's funded by the European Commission. I always have to say that because they are so nice to give us a lot of money. I missed something. Just a second. I have to change something because I'm not wrong. This is way better. Basically, what we are doing is 5 things. Is we create a timeline about the history of technical theater. We create a canon of the, well, we're still discussing, but let's say the 100 most important facts. It could be also be 99 or 101. We're discussing that at the moment. We're looking into teaching tools that can help teachers to teach history of technical theater in a more student-friendly way, a different way, another approach, but tools that can help them, can help teachers to work with. We're working on an overview of different methodologies that we are using, and we are working on creating a network, which is basically what we're doing now. We're spreading the news and we try to get everything interested and involved in what we do. In very short, it's a 3-year project. We're already quite long on the way, but due to COVID, this is one of the first meetings we have face-to-face, but we've been working a lot online. We have meetings with teachers where we discuss and where we work on content. We have working meetings with students that have been postponed, but there will be 3 meetings with students in the next year. And we organize encounters with the sectors. For example, we go to a trade fair and we present there what we are doing, but we're also interviewing people from the sector. I'll try to talk shortly about the timeline we're working on, and then we go to the different working groups that will present their work. The first thing is the timeline, and the timeline is basically on how do we represent and relate historical facts. And the idea of the timeline came in the year 2000, where I bought on, I think one of the Oystad meetings, somewhere in the shop, I bought a history measure instrument. And the idea was that it's a nice representation of history because it gives you a different view than just dates, but it gives you an overview of how things are related, in what order, and so on. Based on that, we first worked on a paper version, which, well, it looks like small here, but you'll see directly that it's a little bit larger, that we used mainly as a tool for a classroom and for research, where students could put information on there, and in reality it looked a little bit more like this. So a huge timeline on the wall. Students could put information on that, but could also connect it to objects or models they created or experiments they did. So in that way, it was a tool for people to figure out how do we represent visually all this information we have about the history. We've done a lot of different experiments in different countries where we worked with students on different sorts of timelines, different ways of structuring it, and so on. And we also worked online, where we created kind of mood boards, but also boards that represented the relationship between all these historical facts. I think this one is, I don't know which one it is. Oh, I think this is about Woodstock, for example. So they work together online on a Miro board, and they kind of try to put from different points of view information together. And that's one of the important things, is that because we're coming from all these different countries, looking at the same history, we see different things, and we see different relationships, and we see different things that from our point of view are important. And by bringing that together, you get a wider view than from traditional history that kind of comes from one point. The idea of working together in that way is that we make history active. It's not just about dates and facts, but it's really about how do we relate things? How are things related the past, but also to the future? What historical events cause that we do what we do now today? It's hands-on, which makes that it's also a lot more attractive for technical students, people that are prefer to do than to look into theory. It's collaborative, so they learn also from each other at the same time. And we create all kind of new overviews and insights. One example is, for example, everybody talks about Hellerau, but nobody realizes that Hellerau is in fact a part of the community of Dresden. If you start to see that, you start to see all kind of new relations. The disadvantage of the paper version we worked with is that you couldn't share, you couldn't exchange it, you can filter it, so there were some limits. So bit by bit, we experimented with a digital version, and the first digital version, not going to go too much in detail, but it gave you an idea of a subject, a timeline, and so on, and you got all kind of details, and then you got it into a timeline. But that was rather limited. The thing we are on now is, if it wants to open, yes, I can share that for a second with you, is a database based on Wikidata, where you have different ways of entering the info, of looking at the information. You can just search something, but you also can say, okay, give me a list of all the sources we have, and then we pick out a source, let's say this one, and we annotate the sources in the way that one of the elements that is presented in this book is a saltwater dimmer, and then we get a detailed description of saltwater dimmers. But it would also give you, for example, information of, I have to make this a little bit smaller, because I can't see that at the same time. And we try to represent information in all kind of different formats. It's going a little bit slow here now. So, for example, you could have it in a graphical version with word clouds, but we also should get what you don't see here. Let me have a look, just a second. If we look at equipment, which is the large thing, then it should show you, no, not this. Yes, here. So here you would see all equipment, and then you can go to sound equipment and to sound machines. And in the sound machines, you would say, for example, a clatter machine. And then I can open that one, and that would show me a general description of a clatter machine, but I can also look at all the occurrences, all the places where they still have this machine. And then I get into the machine that is in Drottningholm, but from there I can go again to the item of the Drottningholm ticket. So we try to visualize all information, or in maps, or in timelines, or in word clouds, or in trees, and also in the, that's one of the things we're working on for the Canon, is also to present it into articles about core subjects, which are the Canon subjects. Which brings me to the Canon. But maybe you should sit here on the microphone, because otherwise they won't be able to hear us. And I guess you want to get rid of this one. Just to say, yeah, it's a bit of a, why does my thing, okay. So we go to the PDF, I guess.
It's not. Yeah. It's
Okay. So.
Full screen?
Yeah, you have it here, and you just can scroll around.
That one or?
Well, you
Or
can just
present.
scroll.
Okay. Yes, so we are head of this intellectual output number 2 named Canon. That's Brina Vesely and me from Berlin, Berliner Hochschule für Technik, just renamed. And sorry for that. Oh my God, like that. So what is a canon? The canon of technical theater history is going to present the 100 most significant European practices. Could be technologies, people, places, artifacts, and buildings. And well, the main thing of the canon is that, of course, like to reduce it to the 100 most significant. Is that what we were arguing the whole day and the last month and the next month is a real challenge. But we are aware of that, of course, 100 is a quite limited number, but still like reducing it to the 100 most important, it gives us the chance to lead to new discussions. And like all the things which are not in the canon is going to be in discussion in the teaching or in together with students. So to reduce it to the most important ones is an important thing. So which brings us to the next one. It's not only about facts. It could be ideas, could be concepts of technical history or achievements. Sorry, wrong mention. So Chris already introduced the timeline to us. So what we'd like to do is that we describe a larger whole of a significant fact or occurrence in history that reflects a turning point or essential part in history, as you see here, for example, with the Große Schauspielhaus in Berlin, which could be an entry in a database for architecture. But that brings us to other points like Pölzig and his visionary architecture for other places, or to the cloud machinery. So all those subjects are entries in a database, but altogether they form kind of a story or a milestone in history. So we do have related entries, and we can somehow form a story about that. One important aspect to find a canon milestone is that it should be able to be taught in one teaching unit. So as you probably all know, all the teachers sitting here on the table, we don't have so much time to really teach history of theater. So maybe one semester, 2 hours per week. So we should be able to have these units broken up into little stories to be able to have them as simple units for teaching. So in 2 hours, for example, one milestone.
So we started to find a structure, maybe in 8 big lessons to have this 100 facts as stories. Of course, we also are teaching theater technician history from different point of views for architects, for scenographers, for theater technologists. And mostly we start at the Greek-Roman part till today and try to combine the architecture, the stage setting, the light techniques, persons and sound, and find a lot of examples to fill with life. And also this project is not to have the only view of your own country, but also to see, if you say European theater history, what do people in other countries? Can we combine? Can we travel? And of course, next step will be of course worldwide. But now, step by step, we are by the European history, and you will see here a proposition of the 100 milestones we are now discussing here. The most important facts, of course, we have to select a lot. At last, you will see some examples we did with the students of the Berlin School, the Bachelor of Theatre Technology. They have to fill a catalog sheet with one of these facts. They have to do research. They have to find connections between architecture, light, persons, sound, techniques. And to see it a bit more clear, that could be an example of a catalog sheet with a timeline connected. What we heard from Chris with some pictures, a short description. We see here the Asphalea system 100 years ago, and doing this research as also as methodology of student learning. So that links me now to the next intellectual output. It's methodology.
Yes,
it's a third one, yeah. To the intellectual output number 3, the methodologies.
Actually, you can use your mic.
I think, but then you have to disconnect your speaker.
Okay.
In case that's on. Sorry? Yes, but I need to wait until his. So let's see. On. No, that's the problem.
Right.
Now I try it again. No. No.
Anders, you need to unmute yourself.
Fourth one.
Anders, try again. But they're not going to hear you if you're not sitting here.
Could you disconnect your speaker? Because that's the problem.
Yeah, okay. Just
So let's see if you hear us now, and I'm going to turn on my speaker.
Yes, it works quite good now.
Wait, I don't have to stop sharing. I have to put on the shit. I miss my third screen.
Yes, I know that feeling. We're soon going to start informing about intellectual output, actually number 4, not number 3.
This is better.
This is better, yes. Welcome to the 4th part of this project. It's a focus on intellectual output number 4, and it's regarding methodology. I think you could change slides. For some of you that are actually aware of the beep sound from earlier times, I will say beep to Chris to change slide. Beep. Beep again. So this comes into the actually the core point of what we are trying to do. We found out that a lot of people that normally are our target groups, they could be small, big. Sometimes they are not used to sit down to listen to normal education, normal lessons. And therefore we wanted to actually find out new ways to maybe teach the history of technical theatre. And I think you could change slides once again, beep. So what we're trying to find out is, could we have good examples from the different partners in our group of how to teach various subjects for small group, bigger groups, ways of preparing and sharing information. It could be just on half a day of lecture, but it could be several weeks. So it could be a variation of different methods, actually. And what are the aims for these trainings and lessons? And also a very important part, what type of resources are required to do these lessons or lectures? I think we have one more to go, Chris. Beep. So one big question that we have been focused on, should it be case-based or should it be chronological? We have had an interesting discussion this morning about that, and we found out, yes, both possibilities should be useful. And especially when you refer to objects in the timeline, it could also refer to one subject, one piece, but it could also be the introduction to a chronological history of light, for example, light equipment. But we have also tried to find what could we do with learning by doing. For example, some schools have been building weather machines in different ways. They had been using drawings and the digital tool for actually go from just drawing to some more visual objects, not films, but it could be something like that also. But could we also do, for example, recordings of practice and record also the oral history for the future. So we know how it was, a working procedure was done before, when we want to go back in time and see how has the working procedure changed over time. Let's see. And then we have also things that not got lost, but it's hard to find sometimes. Buildings and local companies, they come and they go. And if you're not aware of it, it could be very, very hard to find information about them. And they could be of great importance for actually learning things that have been developed over time in the technical theatre. I think it's time for a new beep. Yes. So what have we done? We have started to collect different methods from different partners, and we have used the same format. So we will soon see an example of this format. And the reason for that is we want to have a very, very easy way to collect information, but in a format that could be used whatever thing you want to show actually and teach. And now I'm going to hand it over to the person sitting next to me, Nick Hunt, and Nick will present one example of what has been done in the school of Roosbruford College.
Great, thanks, Anders. So I'm just going to very quickly run you through one example of one of these methodologies that we've collected, just to give you a kind of flesh out how this is going to work. So, Chris, if we could go to the next slide, please. So just to kind of run you through the information we're capturing, obviously there's some basic information about who's prepared it. A title, in this case, it's a workshop to create a candlelit miniature theatre performance. This is a way of exploring candlelight and what you can do very creatively with candlelight. We indicate the kinds of learner that might benefit from this learning process. Next slide, please, Chris. We're mapping everything to a kind of a scale, if you like, that goes from very teacher-led learning activities to very learner-led learning activities. So if anybody's making use of these, you can get a sense of how does this work for learners? Where might it fit into a wider scheme of creating a course of learning. And next slide. We provide some practical information, like the amount of time that's required, both preparation, the actual activity. And next slide. Possibly mapping this onto credits. Not everything will map onto credits, but if it does nicely, then we do that. We indicate the overall aims of the activity, provide some detail with that. And next slide. The staffing that you need, the kind of room that you need to do it in. And next slide. And also equipment, tools, and next slide. And materials. So you get a kind of complete set of, so you really understand if you're going to follow this model, you know what practical resources you're going to need in order to do it. And on to the next slide. And again, any kind of more traditional learning resources like books or recordings, archive material, whatever else. And of course, what you need to prepare in order to undertake the activity. And the next slide. Then a description of the process. How do you actually run this activity? And the next slide. And the next slide. And then here there's a worked example. So this is a specific version of this. And I think the key thing here, these are not intended to be completely prescriptive models. They're to inspire teachers and to give you ideas that you can then take away and adapt. So sometimes there's very particular description, but there's also a kind of more generic description. So here there's a particular example of how it could work, creating a candle-lit kind of mini performance based on a piece of music, based on a poem. And on to the next slide. There's some information here about assessment and feedback, so how learners are going to reflect on what they've learned, how they're going to know what they've learned. And on to the next slide. And some tips, because all of these come out of the actual practice of members of the project. So we do have some ideas. We've actually tried these things out. We know how they work. So there's some tips there in terms of making this work as effectively as possible based on people's experience. And the next slide. And we've also, in this case, added some photographs from that practice. So we can see here students working with candlelight to create a performance. And the next slide. And this is what it looks like from the audience perspective. And the next slide. And the next slide. Here we are. And we've also given a bit of background information. So there's some sort of resources and references there for people who want to find out more information. And the next slide. And I'm going to hand back over to Anders now, just to wrap this one up.
So what we still have to do, we have to extend the range of the collection of the methods. And then we, of course, want to publish and test the methods. It's possible to develop research methods and do as complementary to the teaching methods. And I think we, during these months that still exist in this project, also could find new ways to collect and arrange information about teaching methods and also researching methods, both for researchers, but also researcher teachers, but also ideas for the students, how to actually go into a project doing some research, not advanced research on a PhD level, but as good examples for introduction to the BA students, for example, BA students. And that's what I think we wanted to present from our presentation. I think we still have one to go. Yeah. And now I have to turn off my microphone before Chris do anything else.
Okay.
It's off.
Good. Okay, so the next presentation is about, I have to find the right one. is about one of the teaching tools we have, and I should start it, and you drop yourself here and talk a little bit.
Hi everyone. I am Guillermo Aloy, and here next to me is Antonio Ramon. Both belong to the Barcelona School of Architecture, and we are in this Canon group dealing with teaching tools, and we are actually dealing with methodology of learning by drawing, or drawing to arrive as a teaching tool. Specifically with two cases studies that you have on the screen. On the left, you have the treatise of Sabatini from 1637 that has been mostly drawn chapter by chapter to understand this Baroque theater. About this Sabatini, we have another presentation this afternoon in the OISTAC Congress that you are welcome to attend, that we are going to explain a little more in detail the Sabatini treatise working. But mostly we are working with the group with the ambition to draw for the first time this treatise, to translate it for the first time to English, and to have a commented edition on it. We are not there yet, it's a work in progress, but that's a bit where we want to arrive. On the other hand, at your right, we have another example that it's Ellerau, the fiscal house of Ellerau, of Adolf Appia, Tessenov, Dalcroze Dance School. And these two examples are chosen because, of course, doesn't belong to the same period. One is a Baroque theater, or really close to the born of Teatro all'Italiana, and the other one is the beginning of the 20th century. But we choose these two examples because they fulfill all this interest that we have in the group. Are examples that live together architecture with technology, with lighting systems, and it's not an example by itself, but it's a model that has been replicated and has been highly influential in the story of theater and architecture. As you can see, we are trying to redraw it in order to understand it, and in order to communicate it, and in order to achieve to have a material for a teaching tool.
Well, no, perhaps Sabatini is very important. It's like Vitruvius in the architecture world. Sabatini is an scenographic work, and is true as Vitruvio not illustrated. The place of theater in Sabatini is not illustrated on the theatres. Then perhaps maybe good for students to situate inside this space their scenographies. And in case of Ellerau, we are very, very interested in the myth who plays in this garden city, in another place when an scenograph as Appia and pedagogue of musician Dalcroze, but to an architect and to an technician, Alexander Satzman, meet and create this space.
That to say, of course, to arrive to these drawings, we have a lot of back research that we are discovering really interesting connections that is going to be also published in academic journals, that we have already one for Sabatini, and we are working now with Ellerau. But for example, we discovered in archive the new photographs of the interior, construction photographs of the theater. But also we are really interested as an architect to study the impact that the theater had in the architecture, in the modern architecture, because Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, and Walter Gropius, the three most important architects of the 20th century, were part as a spectator or as a family members in Ellerau. And this influence is really interesting for us to this cross connection between theater and architecture. And I think that's all for our part. We give the micro back to Chris. Thank you.
Okay, let me stop sharing for a moment so we can see who we are talking about. And do you have questions? I think that's the first thing. Is anybody having questions? Oops.
Do you have your speakers
Sorry.
on?
Something happened here. That was not. Yes. Is anybody having questions?
Yes.
Yeah, Kate.
Kate. Hi.
Hello. Hello. Fantastic. What form will the digital models be in? How long will they last? So, will that format last for a good long time? So that we can access them.
To be sure that it lasts, we're going to print it.
Of
No,
course.
that's one of the issues we're dealing in the background of this project with also is how do we create information that can last? Because videos, pictures, all that time, the 3D models and so on, it's not evident to keep them, to save them. So we're in touch with some other groups as well from the architecture side, but also from the audiovisual side at RITS, for example, in looking how can we make things like that so they are updated to the latest standards, which is basically the same process we are already doing for audio and video, where they have kind of automated systems where they update audio and video the whole time to the latest standards. I understand there is also for architectural drawings, there is this type of projects going on. I think this, in the future, we will have standards that can be transferable to new versions. The scariest part is, in fact, what happened the last 20 years, because my worry is we know more about the Romans than about the last 20 years if we have to rely on the information that is left over.
Yeah. I know. I've just seen so many projects creating sort of interactive 3D models that you can't read anymore.
That's why we strongly believe, after a long discussion, that the book format is still alive.
Yeah. Now, there is one other thing is because if the models is really an issue, another thing is we create a database, and databases have to be kept alive. But what we do is we use the standards from Wikidata, which is a worldwide standard. And if we ever wouldn't be able to keep our information up to date or living, we can transfer it to the Wikidata project.
Okay.
So in that sense, then we make it all public access, and there it will be available for everyone in a simplified standard.
Yeah.
Yes, I see myself.
I think this is a question in the chat.
It's not a question, but it's a comment from Jennifer, and we thank you very much for your comment in the chat, Jennifer. Do you want to add something?
I think Wang Jungwei has the right.
Yeah, Wang Jungwei, please.
Yes.
Come in.
Hi, I have a question. First, it's fabulous to be able to see the meeting room through Umberto's perspective, as well as Chris. It's awesome. That's something that could only happen in online meetings. My question is actually quite simple. Do we have like 1 or 2 pages description of the project in English? If we have that, we can have that translated to other languages as well, like Arabic and Mandarin. By doing so, I believe people in other cultures, in other different languages could learn from the practice of the project. Yeah.
I could give you the link to the website, and there the basic description is there on the first page. So that's one thing. talking about multilingual things is that the database is built that at least we can have the titles of all the different subjects in different languages.
Mm-hmm.
And there we're looking into information that we can, we translate it now in the languages of the project, of course, but after that, it will be possible if people are interested also translate in other languages.
Mm-hmm.
That is one element. Another element in the whole of the data structure is that we're going to try to use existing sources, for example, the STEP magazines from the last 40 years. We're going to try to import them as sources there. So they're not only safeguarded, but they also can be searched and they're tagged in the writing. And I think if we figure out that this works, it would be great also to look at other magazines from different countries, if we can do a similar thing. So we get kind of a source base that can be used by students and by teachers, that is kind of grabbing all the information that we all together created in all the years in these magazines, and get a much wider source base to work with. So that's one of the elements that is maybe the future also of this project after we finished, is that we use it to collect information from different sources, bring it together, relate it together, and safeguard also the heritage of all the local centers, for example. That would be one possibility to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We just have 4 minutes to go. I think Richard wanted to say something, or was that a mistake or misunderstanding? Richard, do you have some comments, or do you wanted to add something?
Richard, are you there? He disappeared.
He disappeared. Yeah.
Oh, he's at work. At least someone is at work. Great. Good. Any other questions?
Yeah, one more. Would it be possible to, and I might have missed this, and I'm sorry if I did, Nick, but would it be possible to sort of turn the drawings into like a Pollock's toy theatre, so that you could print out the pieces, as it were, of the theatres and build and make them? Or are the drawings available at scale so that students could do that?
I think
I didn't follow completely the question, but you mean that the students could build up the theater by themselves?
Yes.
Yeah, using the drawings. Yeah, absolutely. Because the drawings, what we discover about Sabatini is that it's a sort of a do-it-yourself theater.
Yes,
it's quite
exactly.
didactical. It's
yes.
Chapter by chapter, you are building a theater with wood and canvas. But of course, that has never been translated to English. It's old Italian, has been translated to French, to German, but never full draw neither. We believe that with the drawings and the translation, the students could actually build up the theater or a part or a machinery or as a teaching tool.
Yes.
Even we can imagine that if you are really, really ambitious, you can build the Sabatini theater inside the classroom, one, because it's a rather small theater.
Yeah.
And absolutely, the mission is that could be replicated by students of architecture school or theater school.
And it's important to know that it's because it's a European project, everything we produce is open source. So
right.
In that sense, because I understood you wanted to make it more easy for students and just to print it in 3D, if they can transform the drawings into a drawing for 3D printing or for a CNC.
If they want that, it's also possible. But I will encourage us to build as it is in wood.
We have just 1 minute to go, and we have one final question from Scott. Please, Scott. File.
Thanks. This is really exciting stuff. Speaking of timelines, when is this live?
Well, we're still working on improving visualizations, and we need to get a domain name to make it live, because now it's on a test version, but I hope in a month, 2 months, we should have a live version that is showable and that has the right functionalities. We're almost there, but I thought that also 2 months ago that we were almost there. So I hope in a month or two time that, but you know how it works with software. So that's basically, I hope that it's there, and I hope people are also giving comments and wanting to contribute and so on, so that in the future it becomes a more kind of platform where we can share also information from our different research, for example.
And that will be the final word, because we are now 1 minute over time.
Okay.
So thank you very much for the group, and it was interesting to have you all here and hearing us. I hope we inspired in some way. So goodbye from us.
Thank you.
Bye.